Presenting Thomas McElree is his friend and colleague, Eric Schmidt.
Hello, everybody. So if Tom wasn't nervous about me presenting, he now is officially nervous. And because I was standing back there, they said, "Do you want the stool?" And he said, "I don't want the stool." And I said, "He wants the stool." And we'll find out why in just a bit, I guess. So Tom and I go back pretty far, to the mid-'90s, when I was the EMS manager at Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh, and Tom was an attorney with Buchanan Ingersoll, and by night, a volunteer paramedic with Baldwin EMS. Now, rumor had it that Tom had a solid EMS background before becoming an attorney. The rumor, however, was not always supported by the clinical skills we saw him display. We worked together on a few projects where Mercy's attorneys brought in outside counsel, and with Tom's EMS chops, he was the obvious pick. One of those projects was introducing the first 12-lead device to EMS in southwestern PA. Many people in this room worked on that project. A groundbreaking effort, really. Although the long-term success rate of the service that got those devices, Liberty, Laurel, Seneca, was, let's call it mixed. The good news, the 12 leads in Baldwin EMS survived and thrived. The real adventure started when the FBI came knocking at Mercy's door, right after knocking on Central Ambulance's door. They asked, right, how the FBI only can, Mercy to manage Central Ambulance. After all, shall we say, some legal complications. Our mission, right-sizing the operation, meaning we shut down the fraudulent stuff, tried to run an honest, functioning, and profitable EMS service. During this chaos, Tom showed me just how sharp his EMS business acumen really was. He became a mentor, a partner, and someone whose lessons still guide me today. What a ride, right up until I was put on special assignment, which is a nice way of saying, surprise, you no longer work here. But through it all, Tom and I stayed friends. We hit a few golf trips where I met his brother Mac, or as Tom's mom calls him, the successful one. Tom left full-time law to the benefit of nearly all of Western Pennsylvania. The fact that it was not all of Western Pennsylvania certainly was not due to a lack of trying by Tom. What he did accomplish with EMSI, now EMS West, is nothing short of extraordinary. Innovation, fierce advocacy, survival through political storms, budget crisis, you name it. He built the largest EMS region in the state with the largest EMS conference and a team that's barely changed in 20 years. If EMS agencies were that stable, the EMS crisis wouldn't exist. As impressive as Tom's professional life has been, it all takes a backseat to what matters most to him, his family. His amazing wife, Mary Ann, daughters Jen and Lauren, and of course his mom, one of the coolest ladies I've ever met. I just saw Lauren in the back of the room and she said, they said I should fight you because you're introducing my dad. That would normally scare me. Right now I could probably outrun her. One of those most surprising phone calls I ever received came from Tom. He said, "Will you marry my daughter?" And I think I said, "Well, let me check with Beth Ann first, my wife." I had the absolute honor of officiating Jen and Mark's wedding in the summer of 2021, and apparently didn't mess it up because they invited me back to do Lauren and Jared's wedding last summer. 2 unforgettable celebrations full of love, laughter, and maybe, just maybe, a couple of cocktails. And that brings us to today. Now, if you've spoken to Tom about this event, you know he really doesn't understand what all the fuss is about. Picture his grumpy tone. Nobody's ever heard that, right? I don't get why they're doing all this, but the rest of us, we get it. We get it big time because you've made an incredible impact, Tom. Not just on the systems or the policies or the agencies, but on the people, on us, on me. As far as the EM experience, turns out he held a leadership position, a little ambulance service down south called Acadian. He told me many times how important he was there. The older I got in my career, the more nostalgic I feel and the more reflective I get. So I started buying old EMS equipment, including a LifePak 5 on eBay. And now he's wondering what's in this bag. Well, it might be that LifePak 5. And amazingly, when it arrived from UPS, I opened it up, and on the bottom are stickers from Acadian Ambulance. So I immediately called Tom and told him I got this LifePak 5, and he says, "I bought that when I was there." He knew the entire history of the device, told me why the numbers, the letters on the bottom of it don't match. So what I thought I was getting was a used LifePak 5. What I got was a piece of Tom's EMS history, and I would be honored, truly honored, if you'd autograph it for me right now. Right here. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in celebrating someone who's been a mentor, a friend, a leader, and very reluctantly, a legend. Tom, we love you, we thank you, and if you still don't get all the fuss about, we do. Take the stool you didn't want.
Wow, I thought he was going to make me do pediatric CPR there for a minute. Whew. So Gary, bad news is after that intro, I'm back down to 5 minutes. So we'll keep going. As I think about the giants, really giants, who stood on this stage last year, and I think of my colleagues who I share the stage with this year, once again, I am truly humbled. Every one of these people has touched my life over the years, and I'm really very blessed because of it. Now, 2 sentences into my presentation, and I'm going off script already. So the one thing I wanted to say, in a sense, Bob was talking about, why are we here? Why am I here? I think of the group, I really feel like the unicorn because I spent 1/3 of my career somewhere else. And when I listen to all the great stories from all of my colleagues, I'm actually kind of jealous that I was not here from the beginning. I love listening to those stories. I love learning about the history of EMS in Pittsburgh. Even though I started in Mercer County and Crawford County, I went to Louisiana for a long time, probably close to 15 years, before I came back to this area. But here's the point that I want to make. When I came back, I was accepted in the EMS community here. And I think that speaks volumes of all of you and all the leaders in EMS here in southwestern Pennsylvania. The fact that they are willing to welcome somebody who really made their bones somewhere else and accepted me as part of the EMS system, that's really a big deal. So as I consider, I'm back on script. So as I considered what I might say today, I started digging through my boxes of memorabilia, and one of the first things I found was a fire helmet that I was issued when I joined my local volunteer fire department at the age of 16. Now, those of you that know me well are probably not at all surprised that I have a 50-year-old fire helmet that I will never use again. But as I thought about why do I still have this helmet, I realized that EMS providers, both as individuals and as a community, don't let go easily. We've had multiple discussions over the years about encouraging the older folks to step aside to allow the younger folks to move up through the ranks and take on leadership roles. The problem is, by the time those of us who are older get out of the way, the younger people already have 25 and even 30 years of experience. Now, my question to all of you, kind of a challenge actually, how do you know when it's time to step aside? How do you know when it's time to let go? You heard Bob Farrow say very clearly, he knew exactly when that time was. So often, I think those of us who are the more senior think that we are the only ones that can do it right or do it best. And I really believe that there comes a point in time when we need to step aside and let new talent take over. So I went to college in Meadville, and shortly after I got there, I went to Meadville Ambulance Service to apply for a part-time job. Now at the time, Meadville Ambulance, Greenville Ambulance, Grove City Ambulance, and Titusville Ambulance were all under one umbrella. And they had support agreements with the Conneautville Fire Department in Crawford County, as well as the Linesville Fire Department Ambulance Service. In the early 1970s, one organization having 6 stations in 3 counties was almost unheard of. We heard Ed talk about Medic Rescue, who had that model for a period of time. Citizens Ambulance, my mentor and colleague, Mr. Pino, is certainly going to talk about that. But by and large, the model of one organization covering multiple areas really had not taken hold very much. By the time I finished college, I had decided that I wanted to pursue a career in EMS. Now, At that time in Western Pennsylvania, paramedic training opportunities were difficult to find. In fact, there really were only two. One was the City of Erie Ambulance, long before EmergiCare, Steve Worth, who offered paramedic training, but only for its own employees. Then I think most of you are familiar with the paramedic training opportunities here in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s. But come on, I was a small town boy. Erie, Pittsburgh, I was a little intimidated. So you might ask, why did I then decide to move 1,500 miles away to get my paramedic training at Acadian Ambulance in Louisiana? Well, there's a little bit more to that story. One of the founders of Acadian Ambulance was Richard Zuschlag, who just recently passed away. Little known fact, Richard is from Greenville, Mercer County, my hometown. In fact, Richard's parents taught my Sunday school classes back when my parents made me go to church. Richard's younger brother, John, went to high school with my older sister. And when I moved to Louisiana, John was the district manager for the easternmost parishes served by Acadian Ambulance at the time. John Zuschlag was my first supervisor there. Now, my years living in Louisiana and working for Acadian Ambulance had a profound effect on my life that even I didn't realize until many years later. First, the people who live in South Louisiana are some of the kindest, most warm and welcoming people that I had ever met. It was really amazing. Even as a Yankee, and by the way, that was not necessarily a term of endearment, but even as a Yankee, they would welcome me into their homes when I arrived to render aid to someone that needed it. The culture, the lifestyle, and the food were addicting. So, sorry, it's what happens when you go off script. It's actually kind of difficult for me to explain or describe the EMS experiences and awareness that working for Acadian Ambulance afforded me. Imagine in 1980, one ambulance service that provided emergency medical care and non-emergency transportation to 1/3 of an entire state's geography. Acadian had an organized education program where they taught intermediate and paramedic training year-round. With nearly 20 stations in 16 different parishes, you could opt for a busy station. You could opt for a slower station. You could work straight daylights. You could work straight nights. The most popular shift was get this, a 48 on, 72 off. Now you think 48 hours on, and actually that flips. So the next weekend it's 72 on, 48 off. That seems like just staggering hours, especially with the studies that Dr. Patterson is doing on sleep deprivation and so forth. But the hours don't tell the story. Every one of Acadian's stations was like a small house, totally self-sufficient. And the crews that worked there were encouraged to bring their families during downtimes. Holidays were celebrated at EMS stations, birthdays, special events. Your family, who were the EMS personnel you worked with, and their families were all welcome to join together. And it wasn't just one station, that was across the entire Acadian Ambulance network at that time. Now, they did not have 4,000 employees like they do now, but it didn't matter which station you worked at, you were part of that family, and you felt that. And I think that's something that I have carried forward for many, many years, and I know that at EMS West, I really say family comes first. That's really who you need to take care of, and we'll get the work done at some point. So, while I was at Acadian Ambulance, I had the opportunity to go to night school at what is now the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, where I earned an MBA. A few years later, after working for Acadian, I completely lost my way and decided to go to law school. Yeah, what do you do when you don't know what else to do? You go to law school. So after 2 years at LSU in Baton Rouge, and with the intent of moving closer to my parents and grandparents who were still living in Greenville, I came to Pittsburgh and finished my last year of law school at Pitt. Now, I was very fortunate to be offered a position with Buchanan Ingersoll, who at the time was one of the largest law firms in Western Pennsylvania. Now, despite the size of the law firm, Buchanan Ingersoll represented a small organization by the name of McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance Authority. Now, those of you that remember Terry Sabina will probably not be at all surprised to learn that Terry had negotiated an incredibly favorable retainer agreement with Buchanan Ingersoll. So favorable, in fact, that the more senior lawyers were thrilled to be able to push all of their work to the new guy who had little EMS experience and a much lower hourly billing rate. So I like to say that McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance was my first paying EMS client. They didn't pay a lot, but that was more than the free advice that I'd been given out prior to that. So I later moved on to Houston Harbaugh, which is another Pittsburgh-based law firm, where one of my clients was the Emergency Medical Service Institute. Well, one thing led to another, and more than 20 years later, here I am. And it's interesting to note that 3 of my colleagues from this year and several of my colleagues from last year were on the board of directors at EMSI when I got hired. And those folks have been instrumental in my career ever since. And as I think back on my time at EMSI, there are kind of 2 things that bubble to the surface. Number one, I had the privilege of working with some of the most incredibly talented staff members that I could ever ask for. I think it's important for a leader to always evaluate and reevaluate his or her own strengths and weaknesses and that of the organization. I did my best to surround myself with people who were smarter and more capable than I was, because those are the people who could fill the voids where I was not as strong and make the organization better. My goal was always to hire the best people that I could find when we had an opening, and then I would adapt their job description to their skill sets, match and tailor the person to the position, as opposed to trying to pound a square peg into a round hole, leaving everyone dissatisfied. The second thing is, over the years, I've come to realize that there is a distinction between doing what is right and doing the right thing. Said another way, doing what is right is not always the right thing to do. Sometimes doing what is right instead of doing the right thing causes more harm or damage with no meaningful improvement. I think it's vitally important that we recognize and reward sincere effort and not punish unavoidable shortcomings. During World War II, Winston Churchill said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts." I think we need to be careful not to snuff out the flame of EMS agencies and EMS providers who are struggling to improve, but who have just not succeeded yet. Now we've got to think where I am here. I'm sorry. So, shifting gears a little bit, bringing us more to today. 1 year and 4 days ago, many of you know that I had an accident at my home. I fractured my skull in 2 places. I had 2 subdural hematomas and a subarachnoid bleed. Now, it's sort of like I tried to use my head as a basketball in the driveway, but I don't remember any of that. But if there's any humor in this, think about it. Here I am, a well-trained, experienced EMS professional. I wake up lying on my driveway, with my head in a pool of blood. I get up, I walk into the house, and my wife tells me, I said, I don't feel well, I'm going to take a nap. Wow. All those years of EMS education just out the window. Well, so my wife is not an EMS person, but she teaches kindergarten. And she knows that when a child comes in from the playground bleeding from the head, a nap is not the right idea. So she wanted to call 911, and apparently I objected. Why get everybody all spun up just because I fell and hit my head? Come on. Well, the irony is that had she called 911, Brian Shaw probably would have been on the ambulance that came to pick me up that day. So somehow she managed to get me into the car, drove me to the closest hospital, which was Grove City, where they pretty quickly determined that I needed to be at a level 1 trauma center. Now, another little bit of humor, which I don't remember, but Jim Palafudis tells me this is true. Apparently, the emergency room doctor at Grove City wanted to send me by helicopter to Allegheny General. I guess I got into an argument with the doctor. I kept insisting that I could get to the emergency room at Allegheny General faster if I went by ground. Well, as it turned out, the weather wasn't cooperating, air transport wasn't available, so I went by ground anyway. You got to remember, I'm an old flight medic. I know these things, so I tried to convince the doctor of that. So I spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit at Allegheny General, followed by several weeks of recuperating at home. Now, my 2 daughters, who are both healthcare professionals in their own right, and my wife, who probably deserves sainthood. Sorry, sometimes this chokes me up a little bit. So, but they made sure that I followed all my discharge instructions, made sure that I took my medications on time, made sure I got to all my follow-up appointments, and basically just tried to make sure that I didn't do anything stupid to make my injuries worse. I was not the best patient. I believe I exhibited all those symptoms and behaviors that you've all learned about to expect from head injury patients. Debilitating headaches, irritability, bad temper, sleeplessness, mood swings, and in my case, hearing loss. But my family hung in there, and they got me through the toughest times. So Gary Harvat, wherever you are, these are the people that packed my parachute. Thank you. I really feel like I got a second chance, and I feel very fortunate. I know that I'm very lucky. But what this all did for me, it drove home the issue of priorities. I encourage every one of you to identify what is most important in your life and make that a priority. Keep that in front of you at all times. Don't let that priority get pushed aside for your job or your career. Always keep your eye on what is most important, and everything else will fall into place. So with that, as the music starts, I'm going to wrap up, but I would like to thank you for allowing me to share my 15 minutes of fame with all of you. Thank you.